This is where I went to grade school. It was a huge grade school. It was the high school at one time, but it's gone. And this is Main Street. Oh, this was the heart of Wetzel County. What a place. And this is the courthouse. This used to be a ferry landing here, where you'd have gone on the ferry and took off across to fly. And I think it's still a landing there, yeah. You can go right out in the water. Many times I've come across here. It was a better day. I mean, it was a better time, more innocent time. This is Fishing Creek right there. Oh, this used to be such a big place. Oh, important, man. And here's where the whiskey store was. They had always stuck. One of these places here, it was brick then, I remember. And of course the courthouse. And the Levi Morgan statue, that was a mistake, because that was supposed to go to over to Morgantown, because Morgantown is named after that guy. And they made a mistake and unloaded that here and built the statue. Now, the Wetzel statue is in Morgantown.
Did they ever think about switching them?
Never did. I guess they'll always be there. This was Mom went there to have permanence. This is where that big school was. I went to 4th, 5th, 6th grade there. And this has all been filled in here. Well, you can see it's been filled into right there. But this was all just a big hollow right here. All different. And we're crossing Fishing Creek again. This used to be a store, right here, grocery store. And the church used to have tent meetings up in that hall.
Oh.
One summer I flagged traffic right here because they were working on the railroad. I got a job flagging traffic. My great uncle lived right there. Had a good friend who lived in this house. No, there's where my great uncle lived, right in that place.
The green.
They were really weird people. Knocked on the door and they wouldn't let you in. You knew they were there, but they just didn't want anybody in. I don't know. Dad could never understand that. Even when they were sick, you know, and Mom wanted to see us on Mom's side of the family. And they wouldn't let anybody in but Mom. They wouldn't let Dad in.
Wow.
Had to be a relative. Now here's where we turn up over the hill, Jay. And this is called the Martinsville Hill. Now it's Route 180.
Wow.
Going out to where I used to live. This is the Martinsville Hill out to Van Camp. I used to bike this a lot. Sometimes walk it. The hill way up there, the highest point, that is called the Bernan Hill, according to the Van Camps. The Bernan Hill, and that's where I was born and raised. This was the parking lot right here for horse and buggies. And some of them just rode horseback to church. And this little level place right here that we're just coming up to, that's where they had their picnics. In the summertime, they had a community. Everybody came.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody brought something to eat. No ice, though. Nothing refrigerated. No electric. No gas. No electric. And they lit the church by oil lamps, and the oil lamps were on the walls. And they had revivals. The Methodists, these were really fundamental Methodist people. It was a Southern Methodist church,
Okay.
but I don't know what the difference was. Now this is the site of the church right here. And I have pictures of the church that are in that book that I have. Yeah. But this is where I went to church. Now we make it through here. That works. And up the hill we go. And I had this put in. Donna and I put this here. I had to prove that, I had to prove everything about him and that he existed and when he was in the service. And I had to do a lot of corresponding with Washington, Department of Veterans Affairs. And he was a Civil War veteran, 15th West Virginia Infantry in the Civil War. He was a relative, but I don't know what relative. All the Van Camps were related. Right. She was a type of lady that shouted a lot in church. They called it shouting in those days. They always talked about Missouri being such a good, beautiful, wonderful lady, and her husband Butler too. They really supported the Nazarene Church in Payton City. But he was Sunday school superintendent in the church, and really nice old guy. And now he was married 3 times. His wives died, and then he remarried. Now, see this blank here? See this blank place was where his wife's name should have gone. But he remarried, and now they're both buried in New Martinsville. So although his name's here, he's not here. He's buried in the cemetery in Martinsville. My grandfather and grandmother on my mother's side, their name was Long. So this is my maternal grandpa and grandma. My mom's parents, They eventually settled up on the hill there. Ferdinand was his name. He built the house up there, and we'll see, the house is gone now, but we'll see where he built a house for him. And that's where the 3 children were raised. My mother and her sister Grace and her brother Robert. My grandpa's parents are buried right there, so they would be my great-grandparents. See, again, it's Long, and her name was Suzanne, and his name was Bradford. Now, these are my great-grandparents on my mother's side. And he was a veteran, and so that's a veteran stone there. He was in the, I think in the Civil War. Yeah, Civil War. That's the Long family. That's the extent of it. And they had a little child that died.
They had 2.
Yeah.
Leota and Ruth.
Yeah. It wasn't infrequent that they had a lot of infants that passed away. And that goes way back. He was born in 1806. It could be he was the father of John Martin. This might be my great-great-great-grandfather.
Raleigh?
Yeah. Very possible. This is coming off. The grandmother sitting beside her husband's grave. She would come off the hill down here, up this way, past the church, and sit by his grave, grieving, of his passing. Yeah. Grief was hard in those days. There wasn't any medication, and there wasn't any help, and there were very few people around to talk to. Yeah. Yep. And Mom said, don't walk on the grave. She told me that a lot of times. Right here. I believe I see it. And that's where the school was. So there was a church, a school, and a grocery store. And the post office. There was a Van Camp post office. But it was a part of the school, or the store. And I went to school, first few years of school in Payton City. And the school bus came, this was gravel then, a gravel dirt road. And the school bus came this way and stopped here. And of course I had come off this hill and down to the school bus. And soon we'll see how steep it is. But it didn't seem steep to me. I mean, back then you were so used to it, you did it twice a day. It's called the Bernan Hill. That's what the Van Camps called it. All these hills were named, had names. And this was called the Bernan Hill. I think it's B-E-R-N-A-N, Bernan. There was an old garage right here. And it was about ready to fall in because we couldn't. So this is as far as you could bring a car. Right here is where they parked. Okay, let's try it, all right? Okay. And this is the way everybody went. This is the only way up there.
You had to walk up this every time you got home from school?
Yes, and down it every morning. Yep, every day.
If you had a medical emergency in your house, how would you get someone down the hill?
Well, they came up the other way, but generally my dad would run off the hill, take the car up to my relatives up this way, and the phone, they had phones, those old ring phones, and so they called the doctor from there, and he came to the foot of the hill, walked up. The doctor did. That was a different day. Yeah. And that's how my sister was, well, both of us were born up here, and Mom had the doctor. And when she knew it was close, she sent somebody to get the doctor. And lucky he arrived in time. But the doctor came up the hill. Probably $30 for a visit. We might be a third of the way. I can't believe I climbed this hill. And there was no relief in the summertime because I had to come get the mail every day. They made sure I got down here to get the mail. And they wrote letters, and I had to bring their letters down and put them in the mailbox, put the flag up. When I got home, they always said, "Did you put the flag up?" I told them yes. So I wouldn't have to have another trip down. Where those trees are, that's where the house was. See, you can almost see the road up to the house. And that's where I lived from about 3-4 months till 11, 12 years old. And it was a nice place. It had a nice paling fence around it, had a beautiful front porch and back porch. It had 2 bedrooms and a front room and a dining room and a kitchen and a kind of a crawl space under to have canned food, to keep canned food from freezing, and to store potatoes. And very nice old place, but remote. And the only way to get here was with horses and buggies and sleds and just riding horseback. And from this house, I could tell you, the Van Camp church that we were in, the Van Camp Cemetery, was just over the hill there. And the Van Camp store and post office was that way. And the Van Camp school was just right there. But they're all gone, and so it's hard for me to tell you exactly what they were. But I do remember this one. And it was a beautiful old place, and the way I was raised, I guess I was raised there. However that was, it was a nice place. Nice childhood. I ran off a few times. Because the place was so remote, I thought, I've got to get out here somewhere. So I ran over the ridge, and Mom came after me, and she got me for it. I won't tell you how, but she got me. But it wasn't a week or two until I was after it again. I just wanted to get away, you know. And my other grandparents lived on the other side of the hill, but I wasn't supposed to run out there. So they kept me here. I think the porch was about here, with a nice back porch with lattice work up, and this was the sort of a dugout place under the house, and the house was probably about here. You know, it wasn't big, but it was probably maybe 24 square, 30 square, but it was right in here. And that low place is probably where the dugout was under the house, for a cellar, you know, where they kept things so it wouldn't freeze. And now the well, of course, it was a 60-foot deep well, and it was right in this area, and I figure whoever dozed all this out filled the well up. And the well was probably here. Yep. And there was a nice grape harbor over the well. And there was a pump, I think it was right over there, that pumped the water out of the well. And there was grape harbor over it. It was a really pretty place. Although it was remote, it was nice. Now the little barn was down in there. It's gone, the guy dozed it over. And the big barn, you see that knoll there? That's where they had dug across the knoll, and they put a basement under the barn. And so there was the basement and then the first floor. And the cattle stayed in the basement, and the hay was up on the second floor up to the roof. And so that was that. And we had all kinds of gardens out in here. And there was a garden right here with a fence around it. You know, a fence all the way around the garden, I guess to keep the rabbits out. But that was plowed every spring. Of course, they plowed with horses. And this is where a garden was. And this was a hay field. And they mowed the hay with a horse and mower. Had a sickle that came up and down. And then they had a hay rake that they put down in the back, and the horse pulled the hay rake, raked the hay up in a windrow, and then we stacked the windrows into shocks. And then with the wagon, we picked up the shock. Two guys had pitchforks, one on this side, one on that side. We pitched it on the wagon or sled. And then there was always somebody on the sled to replace it, you know, so we got a good load. And then we took it to the barn, and we had what we called a hay fork. It was a thing that you stuck down in the hay and then locked it shut. And when you locked it, you could lift the hay up, and there was a track in the top of the barn. It clicked up on that track and went way back into where it was spawned. And the guys in the mill pushed it where they wanted it, so they didn't have to move the hay around so much. Quite a process, wasn't it?
And you helped with that?
Oh, yeah, grew up with it. Yeah. Yeah, I did. From little to about 11 or 12 years old. And then we moved down, and I'll show you where that place is. And of course we had to put up hay down there too. But we got a little tractor when we got down there. Yeah, they canned like 40 quarts of beans, 40 quarts of corn. They did a lot of pickling. They did a lot of sauerkraut. And of course there were a lot of potatoes. There was a potato patch out here. And they brought the potatoes in, and there was a place for them in the cellar where they wouldn't freeze. And we had potatoes into the summer, but we had to sprout them because, you know, down and it got warm, they would sprout. But my grandma that was her job, to sprout all the potatoes. Now the church that we were in was just right over there, the Van Camp Church, right there. You used to be able to see it from here. And the little barn was right over. The more I'm here, the more I see where things were. The little barn was right over in about where those trees are. You know, we drove the cows in there. And there was a pen where we kept them at night so they wouldn't wander off for the morning milking. Otherwise, they'd go out in the pasture. We didn't eat too much beef. We ate pork. And I can show you where the hog pen was. But Dad killed a pork often. When we ran out of meat, he would kill a pig, butcher it, and we'd have all kinds of good meat. Bacon, ham, tenderloin, everything. We had meat, and sometimes we got wild meat. Dad hunted a lot, and great squirrel hunter, and in wintertime he hunted a lot of rabbits. And we always had rabbit hanging on our back porch to freeze, because Dad claimed that once it was frozen, it was better. So we had thawed it out and fried it in flour and then put it in the oven to bake. Oh, it was good. Now over there, you won't be able to see it, but we owned that property on the other side. There used to be a clearing up in there, and we owned that all the way down to a house that I'll show you on the creek. I'll show you that house. But that was another hill I had to climb every day for the cows. But my house was on the along the creek where the bus stopped, so I didn't have any trouble going to the bus then. Yeah, we moved in about 44, 45. Of course, I was born in 34, so I was about 10, 11 years old when we moved off the hill. I'll show you where I was really born. I was raised here, but I'll show you the house I was born in. You won't believe it. Anyway, my grandfather passed away in this house, and he had, I forget the disease, you would know, but anyway, he had cancer. But he passed away, and of course my grandmother fainted. Fainting was in vogue in those days. She fainted, she went right down on the floor when she heard about it. And the embalmers came out and embalmed him there in the house and brought a casket and put him in the casket in the house. And they took him in a sled off the hill and down to the Van Camp Cemetery. And of course, there's where they got the vault. They didn't haul the vault up on the hill, but then they took him up and buried him.
So, and the horses carried the sled?
Yeah, yep,
Hold it.
yep.
Did you have a wake at the house?
I think they had the funeral in the Van Camp Cemetery, or in the Van Camp Church.
All those people were coming
But there were a lot of people that came to see him. After church in Payton City at the Nazarene Church, there were a lot of people that came out after the service, climbed the hill, and I have their names in the guest book for the person that's passed away. I have all their names.
Came up to the house to see
Came
him
up
in
to
the
the house,
Yeah.
yes.
Was that common?
Oh yes, yes. It was a big thing for relatives and friends to come in and share the grief, I guess. And they loved Grandpa. He was such a good old guy. I can't tell you how good he was. He was my friend, no doubt. He held me all the time, and he had a stash of suckers. That whenever I got out of sorts, he'd give me a sucker. But he was a gracious old guy. She was a little bit of a terror. I remember when Dad was trying to plant something in the front yard, in front of this house. He was wanting to put some nice trees up, and he started digging holes, and Uni, that was her name, Uni came out on the front porch and said, "Clyde, what are you doing?" He said, "Nope, not doing that. No, we're not going to do that." And Dad had to take his shovel and trees and take off because he wouldn't disobey Uni. Oh, he could, but he wasn't about to. But she could strike terror in you. She was that capable. Yeah. But I have mail that my folks got. It was just their name and the word city, which meant New Martinsville. And somehow they knew the few people that lived out in here, and they got the mail to us. Came down off that hill and started walking to church. Sometimes we had to walk quite a distance, but generally somebody picked us up. Hayden City Church of God. But that's it. It was a little different from that then, but a lot the same. First Sunday school class I attended was right where those double windows are.
On the basement?
Basement?
Yeah. And I was scared to death because they were all city kids.
Oh.
Loud city kids, and here I was from up on the hill. And that's where we went to Sunday school.
Oh.
People ought to see this place. Now this is the top of a hill where my grandparents lived, the Furbees. This is the place where the Furbees live. And of course it's gone down. Like you can see, it's terrible shape. And it says keep out, but we're going to go in. And but it was a lot nicer in its day. But it's where I was born. I was born in this room over here. This old stone was here. It's cut stone. Looks bad, but we'll go in and go this way. And back in here. Whoops, there's a bird nest. That's a swallow's nest, bird swallow. Barn swallow. And this is where, if you can get in here, this is where I was born, in this corner right here. That's where Mom spent her time giving birth. September 9th, 1934. But this was, I suppose, a lot nicer than it is now, but we hope it was nicer. Mom and Dad decided that they ought to go out to my mother's parents and live with them because they weren't well and they didn't have much of an income. And so they moved out to be with them. And I lived there until I was about 12. And we were there this morning. And it's just a little walk to that house. We're not going to go out there, but it's not far that way. And we lived there from, I was just a few months old until I was 11 or 12 years old. Well, the birds didn't get us. This is what we call a knob, we used to, and it almost has a perfect shape. But the house that we saw this morning, that we went to this morning, is just right on the other side of that knob. Remember I told you I ran off sometime from home? Well, I ran up the other side of that, and Mom caught me. I was coming out here to see Grandma and Grandpa Furbee, but I didn't quite get here. Now, we just came from the Furbee house. Remember, we looked in the bedroom. But then we came up, this was what we call the knob. It's almost a perfectly symmetrical a little piece of land, and we always called it the Knob. We're going out to the Knob, or we're going to walk over the Knob, or you're going to meet me at the Knob, or something like that, because it was a geographic feature. Then this was the Furbee place, but this over here was the Long place. And when I was a few months old, my dad and mom moved from the Furbee place to the Long place to take care of my grandparents. And so I lived here until I was maybe 11 or 12. And then we sold this place and moved down on the highway, down on what's 180 now. So we moved off the hills down into the valley. Right over through there is a kind of a low place in the woods, and that was a part of our farm after we moved down off the hill. But there is an empty patch in the woods over there. And above that, where the tall trees are at the top, I was squirrel hunting in that area, and I climbed up on a log, and it had rained that evening, and the log was slick, and I leaned the gun up against me foolishly, and the gun slipped off the edge of the log, and the firing pin caught on the edge of the log and fired the gun. Of course, my hand was right up above it, and that's how it got this finger. And this area here, this finger, this area. And we ran off the hill, and Mom saw it, and she grabbed a piece of something, I forget what it was now, but it was white cloth, and we wrapped it around, and Dad took off in that direction for Payton City, and we went to the doctor there, who was a friend of the family, and he said, "Sorry, I can't help you here." And so we took off for New Martinsville. That's where the hospital was, in New Martinsville. And they put me to sleep, and I woke up without a finger. And that's the story there. But they kept me a couple days. Okay, I can't think of anything else to say. I'm talking West Virginian now. Can't think of anything else to say. But this is it up here. This is born and raised, and then we moved off the hill down along the road, and I think we lived there until about 1958, and my parents sold it then, and they went north to the northern part of the state. He was a pottery worker, and in Payton City the pottery's kind of shut down. And at the northern part of the state, in Newell and Chester, West Virginia, the potteries still were operating, and he was able to get a job there. Yeah. That's when I taught in New Cumberland, which is a part of West Virginia, but it's in the northern part of the West Virginia Panhandle. I taught in Payton City a few years, and then moved to New Cumberland, where Dad and Mom were. And from there I moved to Lorain, taught in Lorain, Ohio, and was a counselor, and I went to the Elyria Church, and that's where I met Donna, in the Elyria Church, and that's where we were married, and that's where we had all our children dedicated. So it's been a happy life. Yep. Happy life. I just wish I had Donna back. I love her. And she would love to be here. Well, I don't know what she's experienced. I don't know whether she'd want me back or not.
She kind of knows we're here today.
I think so. I feel her presence.
Yeah.
A lovely place. Nice place to be. Well, before we moved here, a people by the name of Meeker owned the house, and they sold it, or they rented it, to a Mercer family, and then Dad bought it, and the Mercer family was still here, and Dad wanted to move in. So he came down and told Mrs. Mercer, said, "Get out of here, we're moving in." And so finally we got him out. Yeah, Dad built the barn and several other buildings. There was a garage out where the school bus is, and that was the original structure. See how many blocks he raised it there? The water used to get, see, it flooded this valley, and the water used to get up in the house a couple feet and left a lot of mud, and we had to wash it out. Well, Dad raised the house. It was an old log house. So he got some friends, and they got under it and raised it up, and then laid the blocks and rebuilt the whole house. I mean, everything. There was an old barn up on the hill there, and a hog pen over here, but he built the barn. And there used to be a cave, just, you see where the road goes up the hill there? That's where the cave was, back into the hillside, where we kept our fruit and vegetables so they wouldn't freeze. Yeah, and then above the cave was a chicken house. Yeah, we lived here from about 44 to 58. Yeah, Grandma moved down with us, and she was here a few years, maybe 3 or 4 years, and then she passed away. But she evidently helped Dad by selling that place up there, helped Dad and Mom buy this. And that was nice of her. But well, notice the name is Gracie.
Yeah, daughter.
She was my dad's sister. Her name was Gracie, and she had a cancer on her jaw and passed away. Well, you can see there.
10.
And they buried her in a little cemetery north of Paden City. Mrs. Furbee, that's her mother, had a dream one night that water had covered her body in the grave. And so my grandmother had her exhumed and bought these lots here and reburied her here. And so that's her stone.
So she was the first one here.
Yeah, she was the first one here. And then the others were buried by Grandpa and Grandma. And I think that's my Uncle Sammy down there.
That's who moved in with your grandparents, right? Grandpa there.
That's Grandpa, yeah.
And that's your grandma, and that's your Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam, yeah.
Who's
and
Ruth?
His wife was...
Oh, he was married.
His wife, Ruth. Hello, this is our last meal, the last bite, mashed potatoes. This is the Friendly Cemetery because the name of the city on the Ohio River is Friendly, West Virginia. And the reason we're here is that I guess you'd say great aunt Sylvia is buried here. And she's the one during a revival when I was 11 or 12 years old. At the invitation during the revival, she came to me and walked into the seat where I was sitting and put her arm around me during the invitation song and said, "Jackie, wouldn't you like to be a Christian?" And of course, that really broke me up. And we went to the altar together, and that's what I claim as being the time that I was saved. Her first marriage was to Mr. Duty, and of course he passed away early, well, what was it, 1920, I think, and his name was Alfred. passed away in 1920, and then in the mid-20s she married again, unfortunately, and married my uncle. And from then on, she didn't have a very good marriage because he didn't treat her very well. And I'm glad that she got to come back here and be buried by her first husband, because she was a saint. There's just no doubt about it. And so glad to be here with her today. She was a wonderful Christian, and I can't stop, every time I try to stop and see her. It's really nice. I hope she and Donna have gotten together. But that's Duty there, that little child that passed away. I'll bet that Aunt Sylvia had a baby that passed away. Yeah, that's what's happened. She never mentioned that to me. So there's the Ohio sign. So we're out of West Virginia. Goodbye, West Virginia. There it is. We've turned around so that we can see back over in the hills. Of course, that's West Virginia over there. And we're bye to West Virginia hills, and hello to Ohio and Illinois flatland. We're going on our way to Bourbonnais. Be glad to get home. Back to all that. God gave us such nice weather down for this trip. Beautiful weather. Beautiful country. And you're welcome to come here anytime. To West Virginia. It is a beautiful place if you like the hills.